The New York Giants spent a lot of money signing Kenny Golladay to a contract, but how is that going to fare for fantasy football managers with Golladay catching passes from Daniel Jones? Let's break it down with SI senior fantasy analyst Michael Fabiano. And Fabs, Golladay, he always has a lot of hype, right? But he's kind of been a letdown the last couple of years, mainly because he's missed action due to injury.
Well, last season, he was an asset going into 2020 drafts. Remember, he had a breakout season in 2019 with 11 touchdowns. But last season, unfortunately, injuries limited to just 5 games. He failed to say a single snap after the Lions' Week 8 loss against the Colts. He averaged 13 fantasy points per game, which was 2.4 points fewer than he averaged in that 2019 season. So Golladay coming off a disappointing season for fantasy managers.
He's 6'4", easily the Giants' best red zone target, given his size. They have a lot of smaller receivers. But what do you expect to see how he fits into this Giants offense?
Well, first off, let's look back at that 2019 season, right? He had 11 touchdowns, which is pretty strong. And he averaged a touchdown catch for every 6 receptions. Like, that's pretty good. But if you take out the 2019 season, he's averaged a touchdown for every 11.8 receptions. Not nearly as impressive, right? He is a playmaker who thrives on downfield success. When you look at his numbers, he ranked 10th among wide receivers in yards per reception average with wide receivers at least 20 catches this past season. He was 4th in 2019. So he's a guy that likes to make plays downfield. And he had a really good quarterback in Matthew Stafford, who was 12th in attempts of 20-plus air yards and was tied for 9th in pass plays of 20-plus yards last season. Now, let's talk about Daniel Jones. He's ranked 16th and 25th, respectively, in attempts of 20-plus air yards among quarterbacks with at least 8 starts in his first 2 NFL seasons, right? And in terms of pass plays of 20-plus yards, Jones is ranked 25th and tied for 22nd. That's not very good, and that downgraded quarterback could hurt Kenny Golladay.
Do you think that that's going to be kind of how he makes his fantasy points, just by catching those downfield passes, or at least trying to catch those downfield passes? Like, is that what we're banking on, his downfield
That's
ability?
that's where he's made his hay, right? Because he doesn't get a ton of targets, right? I mean, this is not a guy who's getting 140 or 150 targets. He's never had more than 120 targets in a season in his career. And I know that he hasn't had a long career yet, but I think that's telling. The Giants need to change some of their offensive philosophy, right? Last year, when you look at Jason Garrett as the offensive coordinator, the Giants ranked tied for 4th worst in terms of, quote, big plays, which are rushes of 10-plus yards or receptions of 20-plus yards. And their offense also ranked 28th in pass attempts of 20-plus air yards. Like, that's not good. That's not going to get it done with Kenny Golladay from a fantasy football perspective. And oh, by the way, they've got a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. Not only did they add Kenny Golladay, but they added John Ross. They added Kadarius Toney in the draft, Kyle Rudolph. They've already got incumbents Sterling Shepard, Evan Engram, Darius Slayton. And I haven't even mentioned Saquon Barkley yet, who is going to be back as the true featured runner in this offense. A lot of mouths to feed. Kenny Golladay was drafted last year, Bill, as a wide receiver 1. Going into 2021 drafts, I would not want him as anything more than a low 2 or a high wide receiver 3.
Yeah, certainly a lot of mouths to feed in that Giants offense. It seems like the Giants decision makers really tried to almost force the talent around Daniel Jones to try to make him look as good as possible, but their O-line is still very shaky. So that is the fantasy case against Kenny Golladay. Check out more of Michael Fabiano's excellent fantasy football analysis over on Sports Illustrated. Head to si.com/fantasy.